Empirically, therefore, the self appears as a play of light and shadow, although conceived as a totality and unity in which the opposites are united. Carl Jung. A true recognition of the self, the inner divinity, the empirical God image, requires a relativization and decentralization of the ego, a process that flies in the face of everything that Western culture stands for. Instead of transcending the ego, Western culture elevated the ego to inflated proportions. Drunk off of his technological achievements, Western man turned away from heaven and focused instead on earthly goals of conquest, power, status, and wealth. This process is the direct result of the social death of Christianity. What once held society together is a common God image that we all shared, and that was embedded in the metaphysical myths of Christianity, but now that's dissolved. Edward Edinger. Because the collective myth, God image, has dissolved in the modern world, the self is forced to appear in direct, intense, and destabilizing ways. Myths hold the psyche together. They connect the conscious ego to the personal and collective unconscious through transference, i.e., the projection of archetypal energies onto God or the devil. When these energies are withdrawn as a result of the death of belief in metaphysical realities, they fall into the psyche, demanding the creation of a new mythology, one that fits in with modern scientific understandings and the realities of the human psyche. But the erection of a new myth is not what happened historically. Instead, Western man did away with myth altogether, and this created a dangerous situation, one in which archetypal energies went beneath the surface, influencing human consciousness in tragic ways simply because we denied their existence. The denial of the archetypal unconscious, the denial of both shadow and God, created a splitting of the social psyche, leading to a massively repressed collective shadow. This mounting pressure in the unconscious provided the psychological fuel for destructive madness on a mass scale. 2 world wars were the direct result of the death of God, to put it in Nietzsche's words. To put it in Jungian terms, an ego out of touch with the archetypes and out of touch with the God image, combined with the Christian tendency to split the world into halves, led to a massive collective shadow projection onto an evil other, the Jews in the case of Nazi Germany. The realization of man's desperate condition began to emerge in the 19th century and reached major proportions in the 20th century. This revelation, increased power and energy for the ego together with a lost relation to God, constitutes a state of psychological inflation or despair. That's my talk for today. Now I'm just going to riff. I'm just going to freestyle. So the archetypal energies in the 20th century, particularly in the West, but of course because of the West colonialism, this denial or demythologization or the death of God happened across the world, right? The rise of scientific rationalism, the power of technology, all of these consequences, all of these things that are the consequence of demythologization had positive effects in the material world, but very negative effects in the spiritual realm. And ego inflation is the result of what happens when you introject. Instead of projecting good and evil, we introjected good and evil. And the consequence of that is ego inflation. And ego inflation describes a state where the personal ego attempts to absorb the numinous energy of the withdrawn God image and is therefore swallowed up by the powers of the collective unconscious. This process robs the individual of free will and creates a puffed up attitude, a sense of godlike status and self-importance. Remember, the archetypes are meaning makers. They make meaning. When the individual becomes enslaved to one, the most powerful being the archetype of the self, he falls into delusions of grandeur, into false conceptions of cosmic self-significance. Quite literally, an unconscious egoic identification with God turns you into the devil. All right, that's all I have for today. Have a good one, guys.